Just picking up on Vern's comments and question, and picking up what Scott Crawford said earlier on, that there is no new water. How do we accommodate, and Lower Burdekin Water actually manages the resource that abuts the saltwater interface down on the coastline. How do we actually accommodate our requirements for our aquifer by actually damming the river and removing those high and low flow events? Do you understand the question? How do we accommodate the natural aquifer recharge in our system in the Lower Burdekin by adding more dams and removing those high and low flow events from a river system?
So one for you, Keith.
Is it possible?
Well, it makes it harder for you, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Is it possible to accommodate that in a system that actually dams the river off further?
Yeah, I think it would make it much more difficult for the region.
To be managed?
Yeah, to actually control it.
So what should get looked at in the whole proposal of the Hell's Gate, what should get looked at that helps accommodate the aquifer management?
Well, I guess I'll go back to, to set and meet the targets. And I guess if you run into a couple of years where you're not getting the water that meets the targets, you could run into trouble like in the past.
Yeah, how do you put that in place before it actually happens? But
yeah, and if you've got more dams, you've probably got a little bit more flexibility, but it's not necessarily the right answer.
yes. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say something too on the floodplain is, like, I'm not sure why we're growing sugarcane and not diversifying. Surely there's a lot of other stuff that we can diversify. I'm not saying stop all sugar, but we really need to diversify the crops that we are growing down there. And I think we need to use a lot of our organic matter better. We burn the sugar cane. It's crazy. Why do we burn the organic matter, which just goes up into the air, rather than green cane harvesting all of the sugar and putting the organic matter into the soils? We would probably gain, 30-50% more stuff. So
two answers back. One is markets, why we haven't diversified. There's really no new markets for us to enter into. And the same as what's been said, if we were to shift 80,000 hectares across to other cropping, other areas are going to be compromised. And the second one is logistics. For burning of cane in the Burdekin at the moment, with their present milling capacities, logistics mean we have to burn. So it's a bigger question that has to go above us to have changes made.
Could we have the microphone down here? A moment ago, Damien was saying we needed a fisheries perspective, and Neil Green here is a past president of Queensland Seafood Industries and an active fisherman. So you had a question, I think.
Yeah, look, firstly I'd just like to say it's been pretty educational seeing you today, listening to most of you, and I did touch base with Damien at the break and just said he was a breath of fresh air from my point of view and my industry, because I've had in the past, I've had the opportunity to look at a lot of case studies, feasibility studies, whatever, and in all of them I've never seen what the value of that freshwater flow when it meets the marine environment, and it is colossal. I'm a second generation commercial fisherman in Barling Green Bay, 45 years. My dad taught me how to fish there prior, and I've now got a daughter entered the fisheries, so it's probably the main reason I'm here today for her future, because I do see some problems coming in Barling Green Bay. Some of the things I've sort of noticed over the years is, since the dam's been up in particular, is the large flows have got smaller. They'll build up to, the dam will be full capacity, then we just don't get a flow. This has impacted a lot on our banana prawn fishery, mud crab fishery. It's worried the mangroves to the extent where, that they're our kidneys of the ocean out there in our creeks and so on, and also they put out a culture that looks after the creeks and whatever. We've lost that, and we've lost fisheries because of it. So we've diversified, we've worked around in different areas and worked how to manage around these sorts of impacts. But one of the things that I've noticed is without the big flows, we don't get the timber that comes down the Burdekin, the big trees, the timber that comes along the beach, all the way up to Cape Bowling Green. That timber is the base that the sand builds up on. And without that, all of that, I've noticed it is eating away since 2000, that spit's been eating away something chronic. That growth since the marine parks were brought in 2004, the growth of the point is, it's gone out 200 metre plus in 40 foot of water. So that sand that's coming off the beach, between Alba Beach and up there, is actually moving north, and that's what's growing that point. Not so much what's coming out of the Burdekin River at the moment. So, I've had a lifetime there looking at it. We've got wonky holes out in Bowling Green Bay where the Burdekin used to run out in the 1800s. That's where your marine habitat is for your dugongs and so on, something I've had a lot to do with. We've developed nets and that are friendly to dugongs and whatever, won awards for it, whatever. I just see we're going to lose all this if that point breaks through. We're going to lose that habitat, we're going to lose that breeding ground. And I think it all comes back to the marine flow that we need coming out of that Burdekin River, and dams that hamper it. We need to look more closely at what effect it's happening on that marine environment. At the moment, all we get is a bit of seagrass or something coming out, and that's not enough to build that beach up. So Damien, I suppose, how long before that spit breaks through? And I've heard Eric talk about it, which was interesting on the point. We already had Russell Island up there back when I first started fishing at the end of there, but I'd be more concerned about halfway along where it's really narrowed. So what do you think of that as far as breaking through? Possibility or when?
Or rehabilitation?
Look, I can't give you an exact date, but I think obviously, I'll be honest, I think it will break through. The numbers I can tell you is that back in the 90s there was an estimate done that there's roughly about 400 cubic metres per year, I think it was roughly, I'll have to go back, but there were some numbers done by a lady called Ada Pringle to work out what the transport rates were along that shoreline. And at the time when she did it, she did actually say that she thought that the Burdekin Dam construction had a role to play in that. And she was talking about the direct trapping. Again, I'll be completely honest, I think it has had an impact to do with the flows, and I think the peak flows are pretty important in, as you say, flushing out sediment that's been accumulated in the lower Burdekin. But I think in terms of delivery to the lower Burdekin, I think the evidence is pretty strong that a lot of the bedload sediment that gets to the coast in the last few thousand years actually comes out of the Bowen Broken catchments below the dam wall. So there's a bunch of, two different elements to answering the same question. But once you get that sediment into the main channel of the Burdekin, then whether or not you have the same duration and competency of flows to move that sediment all the way down through the system, that is the key thing. And then when you get it to the coast, remembering that the coastal configuration has changed quite profoundly over relatively short periods of time. How you get that all the way up to the bottom of Alva Spit and then get it up to the top of Alva Spit is the $64,000 question. And then, of course, the other question which you're asking is how do you stop it from going off the top and disappearing, into the deep water further north? And look, I think that is it's an engineering challenge. There's probably a significant one that is, I don't think you can stop. The spit was formed by the processes that are causing its demise. That's basically what's happening here. So.
Thank you, Scott. We've got time for one last question up the back.
Yeah, Simon again from NQCC. One thing I've got a statement and then a question for the panel. One thing we can do is obviously respond to the terms of reference when the Coordinator General releases those for community consultation. And it seems, if you have had experience with the Coordinator General previously, it seems that they're a little bit more open now with Tony Power, who is a woman. Don't know about that joke. Anyway. But the question is, going back to probably the first thing that was said, is how do we take this energy and actually get this out into the public sphere, and especially in this adversarial world we live in now?
Quick response from the panel. Up the far end. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that whilst we're here today talking about the Burdekin, it's not restricted to this area. We're having exactly the same debate in the wet tropics about Nalinga Dam. And across northern Australia, there's many other dams being proposed. And a lot of the discussion here today is actually the impacts of the dam that was built more than 30 years ago at the Burdekin, and people are still trying to resolve the impacts of that, and here we are talking about building another one. So to me, the question is that we need to put out why? Why do we want to build a new dam? You know, it's not for farming. Water security, you know, Townsville almost ran out of water 2 years ago. Doesn't matter how high the Burdekin Dam wall would have been, it still would have been just as hard to get it from there to here to alleviate the water security. And water security for Townsville, as the biggest city in northern Australia, is vital to northern growth. So what is the actual question we're talking about? We need to get more involvement in the debate. So there's no easy fix. Complex problems never have easy solutions, but we need to have more people involved in the discussion. So the terrain board, you know, which is the equivalent of NQ dry tropics in the wet, up in the wet tropics, we joined Advanced Cairns as paid members, which is the equivalent of Townsville Enterprise down here. And Advanced Cairns has always been proponents of big infrastructure, water, etc. So when we were members, they came to us and said, now you're a member, what do you think about our water policy? You can't say we disagree, because they're valid aspirations that people have within that community for it. So let's get a bit of process in the argument. So we put a draft policy paper together that basically has 5 points. And the first point is that you maximise the efficiency of your existing water infrastructure. The next thing you do is you increase the capacity of existing storage where it's needed, economically viable and environmentally compatible. And then the third thing you might think about doing is water diversion, and particularly not so much in this country, but the western rivers, water diversion, high flows, you pump it out somewhere else and then use it, is widely used at a very, very lower cost, capital cost process, widely used throughout the world. But then, rather than just the next step being to build a dam, let's quarantine the land to enable that dam to be built in future if required. So you don't build a new urban subdivision in the middle of what could be a dam basin. So you take a long-term approach about what is required now, what's required in the future, and you involve the community in the decision making. It's not an easy answer, but I think it's the only one.
Thank you, Keith. Long-term integrated planning. Look, I apologise if any of you have other questions, but we are over time already. I'm going to draw it to a close. Before I do, I would like